So my name is Emma Ferranti. I'm a research fellow in urban resilience at the University of Birmingham, and I'm talking today about some work that I've been doing with a colleague, Anne, and I also work with the Trees and Design Action Group. I organise meetings in the Midlands. So if anybody is interested in TDAG or coming along to our meetings, please call by our stand, which is just there after this presentation session. So I thought I'd just kind of build on what Adam was saying, and I thought I'd start off this presentation by giving a bit of context by talking about this idea of biophilia, which means a love of nature. And it's this hypothesis that because we humans as a species evolved outside, surrounded by green space and nature, that we need this connection with green space and nature for us to be happy and healthy. And that makes absolute sense to me. But the problem is now in the UK, 80% of us live in urban areas, and globally by 2050, 70% of the world's population will live in urban areas. And urban areas are not particularly natureful or green. And I think there are two solutions to this problem. Number one, we all move back to the countryside, or number two, we bring the countryside into our cities and we make it as beautiful as the countryside I grew up in. So that's what green infrastructure is to me. It's anything green and natural in our urban areas. So it could be street trees, it could be private gardens, allotments, it could be the little bits of grass you get by the side of roads or alongside railway lines. It's anything green and natural in our urban areas. And this green stuff, this green infrastructure, it provides us with ecosystem services. So it does really great things for biodiversity. There was only, I think it was 2 weeks ago, there was a big article on the BBC about how insects are becoming extinct 8 times faster than other species, and that they'll all be gone in 100 years. And so green infrastructure is a really important part of providing biodiversity in our cities. It's hugely important for recreation. Think about all the park runs that take place every weekend across our cities. It's important for health. It's associated with psychological relaxation, with stress alleviation, with quicker recovery following hospital stays. And it's also really important for climate resilience, for building the resilience of our urban areas to the impact of weather. So if you have a heavy rainfall event and that rain falls on a tree, 40% of that rainwater will be intercepted and evaporated back into the atmosphere before it even reaches our drains. And then, of course, you have sustainable urban drainage, where you're providing a permeable surface for the water to filter naturally into the ground. Trees are also really important in mitigating the urban heat island effect. I spent all of last summer standing under trees, and they're also really important. They can actually reduce your air conditioning as well, your air conditioning costs in buildings. And can you read that? Can you read that? The formatting's messed up my slides. Okay, so what this slide does is it talks about how we've kind of complicated the way we talk about our green infrastructure in urban areas. So first off, we have ecosystem services, which are services that are provided by the natural environment. We then also talk about natural capital, and by natural capital we mean all the nature and the soil and air and water in our city. And that's kind of, over the last 10, 20 years, we've thought about how we can try and account for this in terms of natural capital accounting tools. And this also has led to the development of valuation tools, which are a means to assign a monetary value to natural capital or ecosystem services. And so, okay, that one works. So the thing about valuing nature is, to me, it's indefinitely valuable, it's infinitely valuable. How can we, without nature we will all become extinct. How can a monetary value, how can we put a monetary value on a tree? And I've given this a lot of thought, but this is a tree from my local park. If somebody wanted to build a cafe or some toilets or a cycle path through the park, that meant that tree had to be removed. I would absolutely want that tree to have a value. I would want it to be so valuable that nobody would think about removing it. But if it had to be removed, I would also want it to be so valuable that there could be a monetary compensation for it, which could be invested in green infrastructure nearby. And so for me, that's what valuation is all about. It's not putting this arbitrary number on the value of landscape, because landscape is infinitely valuable. It's about using valuation as a means to include green infrastructure in decision making, Because in our urban areas, everything has a monetary value, every grey asset has a value, and decisions in urban areas are based on money. And if you want green infrastructure to be included in those decisions, then it needs to have a value. And so this is an introductory guide that we've developed with TDAG. We have not, it's not a new decision-making tool, it's not a new valuation tool, it's not a critique of the valuation tools currently available. What it is an introductory guide to kind of walk you through, step by step, how to go about valuing green infrastructure and trees. And it starts off by just asking the question, do you need to value? Because if you don't, then, I wouldn't bother. But you need to think really carefully about what valuation should achieve, and then the guide starts to explain the different tools available and gives you tips and best practice examples. And we think there are about four different reasons, 4 common valuation scenarios where you'd want to value trees. And so I mentioned a couple of them on the previous slide. The first off is because you want to protect a tree. You don't want it to be removed so that somebody can build a toilet, or because perhaps it's caused subsidence. You want that tree to be so valuable that people undertake some kind of detailed due diligence before you remove the tree. The second reason why you might want to value is because you want compensation for that tree. There is going to be new development, that tree will have to be removed, and rather than just have this rule whereby you take a big tree out and then you plant another small tree in its place, it's really important to think about the ecosystem services that tree provides and create a value for that and make sure that whole value is represented in the reinvestment. And these 2 different valuation scenarios were used in a big development that happened here in London, Elephant Park. There's a plot of land with housing on and trees, and the original idea was to just raise everything to the ground and rebuild the landscape from scratch. And the community group were really interested in preserving those trees because they've been growing for 40 years. They used a valuation tool called CAVAT to come up with a value for each of these trees, and they took this value to the developer. The developer agreed that these trees had this value, and as a consequence, they designed a landscape around them, retaining 60% of the canopy. And the rest of the value of the trees which was removed was reinvested within the development and in the nearby area. And also, not only did it change the value of the landscape, it's now an award-winning development, but it also changed the way people behaved on site. People took a lot more care of the trees that were there. They didn't get accidentally knocked down because people knew that accidentally knocking that tree down would be a huge pain because they would have to then find some way of reinvesting that new money. So that's where it's a good example of really successful valuation. The other instances where you might want to value green infrastructure is at the design process, where you might want to articulate or compare outcomes. And a good example of this is the natural capital planning tool, which was used in Sutton Coalfield, which is a posh part of Birmingham. And here, because we have this huge pressure to build houses in Birmingham, we need to build, I think, 90,000 or something daft in the next few years. There's pressure to develop the green belt, and there was a master plan to develop the green belt, and they used the natural capital planning tool to understand the value of that new development in terms of natural capital, not just at that time, but for the next 30 years. And then they compared it to the original natural capital of the land as just as fields, as harvested products, and they compared them. And the original plan, although it looked really green on paper, when it came to the natural capital planning tool, it actually was showing a loss in natural capital. So they went away, they came up with a better plan that included all the different multifunctional benefits of green infrastructure, all the different ecosystem services it provided, and they were able to produce a plan that included the houses that they need to, but also improved the natural environment. And then when they came to speak to the communities who didn't want the green belt developed, they were able to say, you know, we are going to develop the green belt, but we are going to increase the natural capital. And it really helped communicate the value of the project. Do you know how long I've got left? 5 minutes. Awesome. Okay, and so this is a table from the guide. What it does is it shows you all the different valuation tools available. So we have Helliwell, CAVAT, iTree Eco, SUDS tool, a new tool coming out next year, GIVAL from the Northwest, and the Natural Capital Planning tool. And it shows you in what situations you can use these different valuation tools, whether it's for protection, for compensation, for design, or for management. And what you can see is that one tool does not tick all the boxes. So something like the Natural Capital Planning tool is really useful for design. Something like CAVA is useful for protection and compensation. And it gives you an idea of the expertise that are required to use these different tools. And then most importantly, it tells you to where you can find more information about how to use these tools. The guide also includes kind of basic information on the questions that you should think about asking before you start. So, what is the change objective? What is the decision that you want to influence by using valuation? And who is the audience? How are you going to reach that audience? And then it has a few different tips for success, which are based on the experience of Anne Jalouzo, who works at TDAG with me, who has been using these green infrastructure valuation tools for several years. So things that are really important are, have a champion. Make sure somebody is explaining why you're using a valuation tool. And make sure that you're not valuing everything because you can, but you're only valuing the thing which is important to influence the decision. Tip 7 is, to get expert input or read up. When I wrote this tip originally, it was rubbish in equals rubbish out, and it's this idea that if you don't use the tool properly, that your outcome will never be any use. So the guide, it's an introductory guide. If you're already valuing, then I'm sure a lot of this information is already useful for you, but what we hope the guide will do is it will help take valuation to a new audience and help people to kind of value smart. So just to conclude on this particular topic, trees and green infrastructure providers with ecosystem services, and sometimes it seems daft to be valuing trees, but I think it is the most effective way of delivering a positive change in the way that decisions made in our urban areas affect the natural environment. And it's more than just shoving numbers into a tool and getting a monetary value out. It's about having a clear purpose, thinking about the decision you want to influence, and engaging the stakeholders to make sure it makes a difference. And so the guide will be out in spring 2019, which is now, I think, so not long. Just before I go, I just want to fly the flag for First Steps in Urban Air Quality, which is a similar friendly 4-page document that walks you through urban air quality, where the pollution comes from, how it interacts with urban form, and what trees can and, more importantly, cannot do in terms of air quality mitigation. There are copies of this available at the stand, and it's also freely downloadable from the TDAG website. And that's all from me. Thank you very much.